Hi everyone, this is Kalyan Kumar this side and welcome back to Chemistry Universe. This is part 6 of the aldehyde and ketone series and we call this as nucleophilic addition. And in this we will understand why aldehydes and ketones show nucleophilic addition. Now, to understand that, we need to get certain basic things clear. Now we know that aldehydes and ketones have this particular functional group, the carbonyl group, right? Now we say that aldehyde and ketones for this carbonyl group, it is in resonance with another structure, which is like this, where basically you're moving the pi bond to O. And we say that these two resonating structures hybrid is what the actual structure will be. Now this makes the carbon positively charged. So the net hybrid will have some kind of a delta plus on the carbon. That makes it quite electrophilic. Therefore, if you were to add a molecule like an A minus B plus, where A minus is the nucleophile will seek out the electrophilic carbon and attach to carbon. And eventually the O minus will pick up the B plus and you will get an addition reaction. An addition reaction in which A is attached to C and B is attached to O. And therefore, the aldehydes and ketones have an electrophilic carbon in the carbonyl carbon. Now, the only issue here is that people would say that, all right, you have a C double bond O, but you haven't drawn the entire structure, so we don't see it getting conjugated with anything. We don't see it's conjugated with the double bond. We don't see its conjugation with a lone pair. So how can you talk about resonance when there is no conjugation? Well, actually, it's a myth to say that resonance needs conjugation, because resonance is actually a concept developed in order to explain why we cannot explain the properties of a molecule by a single structure. So we end up drawing all possible structures with certain rules in place, like the rules of resonance where atoms don't change their positions, only electrons change their position, etc., etc. But if you keep all of that in place, then if you draw another structure and that helps in explaining certain properties of the molecule, so we say that actually the molecule is a hybrid of these two. It's not just one of them. So resonance per se doesn't need any conjugation as such. When there is conjugation, there will be more resonating structures. But since we cannot explain the electrophilic nature of carbon just by the inductive effect of oxygen, because that is not sufficient enough to make the carbon that much electrophilic as it behaves as. So we say, all right, let's draw a resonating structure and let's say this structure helps us, the hybrid of these two helps us explain the properties of aldehydes and ketones. So that is the very essence of resonance. So with that out of the way, let's get into the reactions. Okay, so here comes the reactions. And the first reaction of aldehydes and ketones that we talk about is the addition of HCN, hydrocyanic acid. Now, aldehydes and ketones will react with HCN and they need a little bit of base because you see HCN is not a very strong acid. So in the presence of base, you will find that the CN is attached to the carbon and the H is attached to the O. The same logic as we saw before. And the mechanism goes like this. HCN requires B minus to pull out the H. It forms HB and CN minus. Remember, the minus is on C, not on N, even though it seems that it is on N. And then the CN minus attacks the carbonyl carbon. It is the C attacks. And you get like this, and the HB comes and gives back the H plus and forms OH. So here you see this particular product is formed, and this is called a cyanohydrin. Now the reaction can be carried out if you use NaCN or KCN also, but you need HCl in limiting amount so that you eventually get the H attached. Now you don't need HCl in large amount because you don't want the Cl minus to go and get attached. Cl minus has to be low. You want it is the Cn minus that needs to be attached. So NaCN, KCN is an excess and HCl is present in a small amount. Okay. HCN is fairly acidic, but it is also very toxic. And we see that more the steric hindrance, lesser will be the yield of the product, which is expected. Even though CN is not a very big molecule, but even a bit of a steric hindrance would reduce the rate of the reaction. And as you know that unsymmetrical ketones and aldehydes, except of course formaldehyde, because it's not an unsymmetrical aldehyde anyway, they give a racemic cyanohydrin because the carbonyl carbon is planar, and therefore the CN minus can attack from the top or from the bottom, and you get both enantiomers in equal amounts. So now using this cyanohydrin, you can produce a variety of compound. You can do partial hydrolysis, you can do complete hydrolysis, you can even reduce it with nickel and hydrogen. If you use partial hydrolysis, the cyanide becomes amide. If you use complete, it becomes carboxylic acid. And if you do the reduction, it forms primary amine. So from the cyanohydrin also, you can get a lot of compounds. All right, the next one is reaction with Grignard's reagent, GR. We have already done this in alcohols, but we'll do this again. So you have a ketone or an aldehyde, you react this with RMGX. We saw all of this in organometallic compounds. And then you have this, R minus attacks, pi bond shifts to O takes the MGX. And then eventually you add water to make the O minus into OH. Now remember, if it is formaldehyde, meaning both are hydrogens, if these two are hydrogens, then obviously these two are hydrogens, and you are going to get a primary alcohol. If one of them is already an R, that means a regular aldehyde, then you will end up getting a secondary alcohol. But if it is a ketone, then you will get a tertiary alcohol. And we have done all of this before. So formaldehyde gives primary alcohol, other aldehydes give secondary, and ketones give tertiary. And if the ketone is highly hindered, then you get a weird product. I mean, if the ketone is heavily hindered, then you will not get a tertiary alcohol. You can even get a secondary alcohol sometimes. So if the ketone is highly hindered, then the product may be a secondary alcohol. For example, look at this, highly hindered, CMe3 on both sides. And if you react this with, let's say, ethyl MgX, then the minus on the carbon attacks the adjacent carbon. It removes the hydride, which immediately attacks this carbon. The pi bond shifts to O, and if you end up putting water at the end, you'll get a secondary alcohol along with an alkene. Now, it should be understood here that one might again have this doubt. How does H minus leave? H minus is not a good leaving group. Hydrogen is extremely electropositive. And so how does it go as H minus? Well, actually it doesn't go as H minus. You see, in any reaction, and you will see a lot of reactions in the future, you'll see a reaction called Cannizzaro reaction also, when we do name reactions in aldehydes and ketones. You will see H minus leaving, but it doesn't leave. It leaves and simultaneously attacks. If hydrogen has a position to attack and a requirement to leave, it will do so. But if there is no place where it can attack, it will not leave. It's not going to leave like a halide. So it will leave and attack simultaneously. So technically H minus doesn't leave. H is leaving with the pair of electrons and attacking simultaneously. And wherever you see this, you will always find H leaving and attacking simultaneously. Alright, then comes reaction with water. And well, this is a little bit, probably a little weird. Aldehydes or ketones react with water to form geminal diols. Now, many of the times I've said this, that, geminal diols are unstable, even if they are formed, and they immediately lose water and form carbonyl compound. But right now I'm talking about the opposite reaction, where aldehyde and ketones are reacting with water to form geminal diol. Obviously, we're only going to talk about cases where the geminal diols are stable enough. Generally, they are not. Now, the reaction is slow as water is a weak nucleophile. And the reaction can be made faster by adding a small amount of acid. And I'll show you how does this help. Despite this, it is a reversible reaction. That means You might get a good diol, but diols are generally going to be in equilibrium with the aldehyde of the keto form. Okay, but in some cases the diols are extremely stable, and the places where they are, I'll show you that. And the value of the equilibrium constant differs for different aldehydes and ketones. And at 20 degrees Celsius, if you look at the value, look at these values. Formaldehyde is 2000. That means the K value is 2000. That means it highly favors diol. Acetaldehyde is only 2. So acetaldehyde being 2 means very less of the diol, but still diol is going to be more than the aldehyde form. But look at acetone. It is 2 into 10 to the power negative 3. It doesn't favor the formation of a diol. But look at the other one. This is called chloral. This chloral 2.7 into 10 to the power 4, that is almost 27,000. That means it highly favors the formation of the diol. So what are the factors that affect the stability of the hydrate? Well, first is minus I effect. Because if the carbonyl carbon has a withdrawing group attached, then obviously it will make this carbon even more electrophilic, more susceptible to attack by even the weak nucleophile water. The next, of course, is if the diol is stabilized by hydrogen bonding. In most of the cases, this will be the case. And obviously, more the steric hindrance, less will be the ability to attack of water. So the attack of water will be hindered. If you look at the mechanism, well, the mechanism goes like this. You have the aldehyde or the ketone. First, it reacts with H plus, the lone pair, and that would pick up the H plus and form this. The pi bond shifts to O because that's a resonating structure now. And the carbon becomes electrophilic. The water weak nucleophile attacks. That becomes protonated and then it releases the H plus acid catalyzed and you get a diol. Now, one might argue that why do we insist on calling the attack of, let's say, remember in the beginning I said A minus B plus. Why do we insist on calling it a nucleophilic addition? Because after all, the nucleophile is attached to C and the B is attached to O. So both the nucleophile and the electrophile both are attaching. So why do you call it a nucleophilic addition? Well, it depends on the rate determining step. Whatever attacks in the RDS, that is what the mechanism is called. And the RDS is this, the attack of the nucleophile. It doesn't matter what attacks first, because right now you see the electrophile attacks first, but that is not the RDS. What attacks first doesn't matter. What attacks in the RDS is what matters. And let's look at some stable hydrates. You will notice chloral is one. And the chloral forms this. And you can see the diol is hydrogen bonded with the CLs. Can you see this OH forming a hydrogen bond here, this forming a hydrogen bond here. Sorry, this is the hydrogen bond formed here. And again, one might say that, okay, with chlorine, why do you call it hydrogen bonding? Well, chlorine is a little different from oxygen, nitrogen and fluorine, where we call hydrogen bonding both inter and intramolecular. With chlorine, generally intramolecular bondings are hydrogen bondings because they're pretty close. Whereas when it is intermolecular, we don't call it hydrogen bonding because they're at quite a bit distance and the bond is not strong enough to qualify as a hydrogen bond. And next is, this is chloral hydrate. Next you have is ninhydrin. This is what is used in the test of amino acids. You add water to this, it will form a stable hydrate in the middle ketone because that can hydrogen bond with both the terminal ketones. So this is ninhydrin hydrate. You will even notice this in this case. The middle ketone is the one that gets hydrate and forms hydrogen bonding with the end ketones. Whereas in this, it is not hydrogen bonding, that is the reason. In this, what happens is, this is a three-membered ring, the bond angle is required to be 60, whereas hybridization is sp2, which wants it to be 120. So you can see the angle strain. It's a 60-degree angle strain. It needs to be 120, but is forced to be 60. Whereas on forming a hydrate, this becomes sp3, which means it is required to be only 109 degree, and this is still 60. So this deviation is less. meaning less angle strain in the geminal diol. And that's why it happens. And with fluorine also, it's the same case. Hydrogen bonding. Okay. So now let's look at the next reaction that's called reaction with alcohols. All right. So the way this particular thing happens is that you have an aldehyde or ketone and alcohol reacts with it. The H of the alcohol goes and sits with the O, while the OR comes and sits with the carbon. Now this is called this is called hemiacetal. And if it is from ketone, it's called hemiketal. But it has a tendency to react with one more mole of alcohol. Again, the H will go and sit with the OH, which means water. Now the water would leave, and then the OR would come and sit on the carbon. You would end up getting a geminal ether or geminal diether. And geminal diethers are extremely stable. They're very stable when it comes to reaction with LAH or catalytic hydrogenation, etc. So this reaction is generally used as a protection for aldehydes and ketones. So say for example, you have an aldehyde or a ketone and you have, let's say, an ester. And you want to reduce the ester to alcohol, but you don't want the aldehyde or ketone to suffer reduction. You want it to be as it is. Now generally you would use something like an LAH, because NaBH4 will only reduce the ketone or the aldehyde and not the ester. If you use LAH, it will reduce both ester and aldehyde ketone. It's stronger one. But you remember, you don't want the aldehyde or ketone to become the ester, become the alcohol. So what you do is you protect the aldehyde or ketone by first forming a geminal diether, an acetal, not a hemiacetal, an acetal. And then you do the reduction. Once you do the reduction, now since it is geminal diether, you can't do anything about it. Only the ester gets reduced to alcohol. And then you add H3O plus to remove this. The reaction is reversible. So that means it can go forward to form a diether, and the diether can form back to the carbonyl compound. So when you add H3O plus, you can immediately make sure that that particular thing is able to form the compound. All right, so here we go. So aldehydes and ketones react with 2 mole of an alcohol to give 1,1 geminal diether, more commercially known as acetals and ketones respectively. So as I said, you have an aldehyde, you take 2 mole of an alcohol and you use dry HCl in this case, and you get a geminal diether. This is acetal. And the way this happens is like this. You have the aldehyde or ketone with the H plus, and then the O picks up the H plus, and this H plus is very small in amount because it is dry HCl. And the reason you need dry is because if you have wet HCl, the acetal won't form only, the acetal will immediately hydrolyze, because acetals are very acid sensitive groups. So the O will get protonated, the carbon becomes more electrophilic. Now the alcohol will act as a nucleophile, and you would get this. Now this can do 2 things. If it does release the H plus from the alcohol to the environment, you'll get this, and this is hemiacetal. But if this H plus, which is released by the alcohol, doesn't go to the environment, doesn't go to the solution, it goes to the OH instead. That means intramolecular proton exchange. You'll get this. Now here what will happen is, another molecule of alcohol now can act as a nucleophile on the carbon because it has a good leaving group of OH2 plus, and you'll get this. And then this releases H plus to the environment and you'll get acetal. So that is the advantage. But remember, as I said, acetals are very sensitive to acids. So if you put H3O plus in it, it will go back to being an aldehyde and 2 mole of alcohol. Now, remember one thing, you need to understand this, that if the medium is basic, acetals don't get affected. But if it is a hemiacetal on the other hand, so acidic medium will break the acetal, basic medium doesn't break the acetal. But when you have a hemiacetal, then yes, the H3O plus will definitely break it. But not only that, even the basic medium does that. So remember, hemiacetals are sensitive to both acid and base. Acetals are sensitive only to acids. And the way this happens is, for a hemiacetal, if you have something like this and you have a base, this OH minus picks up the H plus from the alcohol, and you get this, and this will attack back, and the OR would leave, and you'll get this. Now, generally, ketones do not form ketones that easily, at least not with monohydric alcohols. But if you have a dihydric alcohol, then it can form, because that way the entropy decrease is not that high. Because generally what happens is, when you have one aldehyde and two alcohol, the three molecules are together combining to form one. So entropy decreases pretty high. Now ketones are less reactive anyway because of more hindrance. So more hindered, and that too you have three molecules becoming one, entropy also doesn't favor. So the reaction is not that easy to happen. But if you take a dihydric alcohol, that means one compound having two OH, so the number of molecules is still 2, and 2 becoming 1 is not that great a decrease in entropy. So entropy also sort of helps in this particular case. So it means if you want to make a ketal, you need a dihydric alcohol, and that will form a cyclic diether. Now remember, aldehydes are always more reactive than ketones, even towards a dihydric alcohols. Okay. So suppose you have aldehyde or ketone, and you want it to be converted into this. Now look at what I'm doing. I'm only wanting the ketone to become the alcohol, not the aldehyde. There is no reagent that can do that. Whatever reagent that can reduce a ketone will also reduce an aldehyde. But we know that aldehydes are more prone to forming acetal and ketal. So you can either take a cyclic one, you can take a dihydric alcohol, or you can take 2 mole of a monohydric alcohol to completely ensure ketone doesn't form the ketal. And as it is, if you take one equivalent of a diol, it will only react with aldehyde, because aldehydes are more reactive. So it will form a cyclic acetal with aldehyde, but not with the ketone. Then you do LAH or NABH4, you get this, and then you release this back by using H3O+. So sometimes you can be used, and this can be used to figure out which gives a positive iodoform test. Now, if you look at this, you may hardly feel it is going to give something. I mean, you have a H, you have a CH3 or OH. It doesn't, sort of makes sense. But remember, in iodoform test, we use base. And can you see it is a ether and an alcohol? It's a hemiacetal. So basically, it will first convert into acetaldehyde. And then it will give a positive iodoform test. Okay. So you have to take that also into account. Say, for example, you are asked this. Again, can you see it's an ether and an alcohol? So what will it do? It will first give you this kind of, see, this is the carbon on which the two O's are attached. So this is the one that will form the aldehyde. Okay. And this part will become the alcohol. And obviously, this is not going to give you an iodoform test. So this one with OH minus first becomes this, and this will give the positive iodoform test, whereas this one only forms this, and this cannot give the iodoform test. So you have to check that out. The next is the addition of NaHSO3. Now, NaHSO3 addition is bisulfite addition, and HSO3 minus attaches to the carbon, and SO3 minus 2 minus will get attached to the carbon, and the H will get attached to the O, and you will get this. So basically, and this is a white crystalline solid, so we can easily see its formation happening. But as you can see, the SO3 Na is a pretty big group, So it will only happen with aldehydes. I mean, I don't think it will happen with ketones at all, maybe small ketones, and that too aldehydes and not too hindered ones. So the mechanism goes like this. You have this, and you have this is HSO3 minus. The minus, remember, is on O, but the bond that is attached to the carbonyl carbon is sulfur. It's not O, because what happens is this minus comes back. S attacks carbon. It's a much better nucleophile, and that goes to O, and you'll end up getting this. And since the downward part is a strong acid part, so it will donate the proton to the upper part, and you will get this. Okay. Now, aldehydes, all of them almost give the NaHSO3 reaction. Among ketones, only the methyl ones will give it, perhaps, and not even the aromatic ones. And certain cyclic ketones react. This reaction can be used to separate carbonyl compounds from alcohols, especially when you are reducing carbonyl compounds to alcohols. When carbonyl compounds are converted to alcohols, some amount of carbonyl compounds are left unreacted. So the unreacted part can be used to form a bisulfide product. To this mixture, we add NaHSO3 and carbonyl compounds react with it to form a white crystalline solid, and they can be easily separated from the mixture. So basically what happens is, once it is formed, if you want to get it back, well, do hydrolysis, either acid-based or basic. In either case, you will get the aldehyde or ketone back. And the last of the reaction is called the Mozingo reaction. We've already done this. We've already discussed this in the reduction reaction of aldehyde and ketones. And this was the reaction in which we talked about the conversion of an aldehyde and ketone to an alkane. We used a dithiol, and we formed a cyclic ketal kind of a thing. And then we did reduction with H2Ni, and we got the alkane formed. So that is the Mozingo reaction. You can go and check it out in the reduction reactions of aldehyde and ketones. And with that, we come to the end of this particular part of the video. And this was part 6, nucleophilic addition. And the next one will be video number 7, which is going to be nucleophilic addition elimination reaction. So I hope you understood whatever it was required in this video. Watch it as many times as you can. Make sure you to make notes, pause the video as many times. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching this, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.